The truth is that having children doesn't cure infertility, right? Having children solves not having children. It's as simple as that. When fertility treatment works, when people naturally conceive, or when people do donation, surrogacy, adoption, all of these things, they do not solve infertility and they do not solve the trauma of infertility. They solve not having a child. And so that pain and that trauma, it's still part of who we are and part of our job as we move forward in life is figuring out what to do with that. Just like we have to figure out what to do with all the other losses and pains and sorrows that we get hit with throughout our lives.
Welcome to My Fertility Podcast, Superhumans, the show that brings you expert insights, personal stories, and the latest in fertility care all in one place.
Whether you're starting your fertility journey, navigating challenges, or just exploring your options, we're here to empower you with knowledge, support, and hope.
Join us as we dive deep into topics that matter most, from IVF and fertility treatments to mental health and wellness.
I'm Dr. Mavis Garcia.
And I'm Dr. Wise. We're two of the fertility specialists at Markham Fertility Centre in Markham, Ontario, Canada. Think of us as your sisters in all things fertility. Let's demystify the world of fertility together. On today's episode of My Fertility Podcast, we are very glad to be joined by Dara Roth Edney, who is the founder and clinical director of Informed Fertility, a group counseling practice specializing in family building. With a master's degree in social work, as well as more than 2 decades of clinical and research experience, she has counseled thousands of intended parents, conducted assessments for countless donors and surrogates, and provided supports through pregnancy and parenting, as well as to donor-conceived adults. She's also the past chair of the Canadian Fertility and Andrology Society's Counselling Special Interest Group, a board member of Donor Conception Canada, and an instructor at Wilfrid Laurier University, having developed their first course on fertility counseling. On a personal note, Dara, after many years of infertility, herself is a parent through surrogacy. So she is not only a fertility expert in theory, but in practical terms as well, having gone through it herself. Now, today's episode is focused on talking about Mother's Day and specifically navigating Mother's Day as somebody who's experiencing infertility or somebody who's on a fertility journey. But really, a lot of the things that we end up talking about are universal and can be applicable to anyone experiencing any kind of difficulties, whether it's the fertility journey, whether it's navigating secondary infertility, navigating life after miscarriage, or just navigating life and grief in and of itself.
Thank you so much, Dara, for being with us today. Today's topic of conversation is a heavy one, but a really important one. I remember when I was going through my fertility journey, Mother's Day was the hardest day of the entire year, possibly followed by Christmas Day, but Mother's Day probably a lot more. And I have a wonderful mother, and she really loves celebrating Mother's Day every single year. And of course, I did it for her, and it was so important. I could not hide from that day. I had to show up, and I had to do all the things. And she deserves that so much, but I don't think that she really understood how hard that was. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about celebrating Mother's Day and why it feels so painful and so impossible and so unbearable for somebody going through fertility.
First of all, thank you for having me here. And on this, as you said, such an important topic. And I would say really the pain of Mother's Day starts, of course, before that day. The anticipation of it, for some people, actually ends up being even worse than the day itself. So I would say towards the end of April, as we start getting into May, people know that date is coming. Things in stores are starting to show up. People are getting notifications from different companies. Like you're really starting to see that and feel that. For people with secondary infertility, their kid or their child, their children may be starting to talk about it or do activities for it at school. Part of the pain of it is that it's unavoidable, right? So there's this personal pain that is being exacerbated by everything happening around you and the expectations of that. I was really captured by the way you said that you had to celebrate those things with your mom. One of the things that I really encourage people to think strongly about is what they have to do, what they need to do. There are consequences to the choices that we make, absolutely. But it's also true that often we don't have to do things in the way that we think that we do. I'll give you an example. I have a similar story in the sense of many, many years of infertility and a mother that I adore. And for a long time during my infertility, I just did what I always did, right? My sister, my mother, and I would go out for brunch. And I just felt like I had to do that I had to put my own pain aside, that my mother deserved it. My sister was a mother at that point. She deserved it. And that I just had to put my own pain and feelings aside and focus on the people that I love, that I couldn't be kind of selfish. And I still remember the turning point for me, which was one of the more painful times in my journey. We went to a fancy hotel for brunch. And when we walked in, somebody at the front door who was seating people gave everybody a rose. And then we sat down at the table, and I was trying hard not to cry, but thought I was doing a pretty good job. And then a waitress came over to take our order and said, "Oh, so this is your mother?" And so looked at my sister and I and said, "So how old are your children?" And my sister told her, and I said, "Oh, I don't have children." And she took my rose away. I actually could cry just thinking about it. She said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. These are just for the mothers." And I was like, "Okay, I'm never doing this again." And so what we did,
Holy.
yeah, it was
Oh my
really,
goodness.
it was terrible. And I think it really highlights not just my own story, but what it feels like to be out, right? To be outside of this thing that is celebrated so profoundly in so many different ways, in so many different cultures, in so many different countries. And so that day I made a decision that I was never going to do that again. And from then on, what we did was I took my mother out on Saturday. So I still had an opportunity to celebrate my mom.
Right.
But because it wasn't Mother's Day, there was no fanfare about it. Like, we just went to a regular restaurant and had brunch or dinner. And to this day, I still don't celebrate Mother's Day with my mother on Mother's Day. And so I think that idea of like what you have to do, it's really worth thinking about, what is your goal, right? So you shared that your goal was to celebrate your mom, to make sure your mom knew that you valued her, that you loved her. But why does that have to be on Mother's Day? Why can't you do it the day before or the weekend before, right? So really starting to think about, whose pain are you protecting? Mother's Day is something that everybody who's trying to conceive, who identifies as a woman, who intends to be known as a mom, is something they want so much. And it's just this sort of like national or international day that recognizes the importance of this role. And it's a reminder of the pain. And of course, for people who've been struggling for more than a year, it's a reminder of the passing years. This is my first Mother's Day, my second Mother's Day, my third Mother's Day, my seventh. That last year, I thought this Mother's Day, for people who've had miscarriages, often being like, I should have been a mom this Mother's Day. Like, if that hadn't have happened, my baby would be a year old, 10 years old, 6 months old. So these dates in the calendar are so profound. We have the right to make choices that will protect ourselves, and a responsibility, I think, not to put other people's needs in front of our own, because we need that strength and resilience to get through this, right? And if our moms don't understand that, that's okay. Like, that's okay. It's okay if they don't. And it's not the end of the world if their feelings are hurt. I know that sounds cold, but the options are, like, you are deeply, deeply hurt and your mom is okay, or you are hurting and your mom is hurting, and you're both doing something together to try and make it better.
Yeah, I mean, Mother's Day, there's such a dichotomy of emotions there, right? Because on one hand, you don't want to take away from the love, the feelings, the gratitude that you have for your own mom. Let's say there's a mother-in-law, other mothers in your family, and they have a right to be celebrated. You want to celebrate them, right? Because you have a great mom and you love her, of course, but just trying to manage those emotions. So, it sounds like setting boundaries, of course, is so important. How did you kind of start that conversation with your mom and your sister? Or what advice would you have for someone who is thinking about taking that step of setting boundaries? Like, how do you do it? What are the words you use? What are some phrases? Like, give us the practical stuff.
Yeah. So first, I want to acknowledge how hard it is to set boundaries. So what I'm going to say might sound sort of straightforward because I'm just saying words. But I come from a very, very deeply interwoven family. And it's taken me many, many, many long years to learn how to set boundaries. And it's still something that is not easy and straightforward for me. Like a lot of us, I'm a people pleaser. I like to make people happy. And setting those boundaries is hard. I want to be clear that what I'm about to say, I'm not suggesting it's easy or straightforward. I think a good way of looking at boundaries is that when it becomes appropriate to set them, it's because you're hurting. And so then is the time for you to ask, like, who do I need to look out for here? Right. So I started setting boundaries, not actually linked with that Mother's Day story that I just shared. That was my Mother's Day boundary. But about a year and a half or so, maybe 2 years into my infertility, I started setting some boundaries around events that I could attend overall. It became overwhelming and not manageable for me to attend big holiday dinners and like all of those big events, baby showers, and all of those things. And I realized that whether I attended these things or not, I was going to be in pain, right? It's not like not going to a Rosh Hashanah dinner or a Passover dinner or a Hanukkah party. Like, it's not like me not attending that, I was going to be happy. It's just that the pain of me attending it was starting to not be manageable. The other piece of it I realized is that my absence made people sad or angry or confused or upset, but they were also fine. I would have made a different choice if I had a single parent and no siblings. And if I didn't celebrate a holiday with them, they would be literally alone. That's a choice I wouldn't have made. If I had a friend who was having a baby, who had no partner, no family, no other friends, of course I would do something for her. But actually, that wasn't the scenario. So my absence, people noticed it. And in fact, I got a lot of pushback. But it's also true that all those events went off fine. Like, people had lovely holiday dinners. My friends had fun baby showers. So I just started to realize that when I weighed pain, my absence didn't cause them the same amount of pain as my presence caused me.
Mm-hmm.
So really just starting to think about that made me think, why am I putting everybody else's feelings and emotional safety in front of my own, where I go to one of these events and I'm not okay for days and weeks afterwards? Right? I started to feel like that's not manageable. And for some people, this is a long journey, right? It was more than 5 years from when I started to when I ended up with my daughter through surrogacy. I needed to take care of myself or I would not have been able to do what I needed to do. And so first, like a lot of us, I tried explaining. I tried explaining to people, this is hard for me. This is hurting me. I don't think I can come because of this and this. But because I'm fortunate and people in my life love me, they explained to me why it would be okay. It'll be fine. We won't talk about children, or it'll be fine. This holiday isn't focused on children, or it'll be okay because of this and because of this. And so that was an important lesson in boundaries, which is that when you engage in a conversation with somebody, that isn't setting a boundary. Because if you say to somebody, I can't come because people are going to talk about kids, they'll say, no, we won't. If you say, I can't come because watching everybody open up presents Christmas morning or chase Easter eggs is too painful, they'll say, oh, we could do that before you arrive. Like, they will, because they love you, they want you to come.
Right.
So one of the lessons to learn in boundaries is with the people you love, you can explain, but then after that, don't. Just say what you say. Because if you say, I'm so sorry, I can't come, and they say, why not? And you say, I just can't, it's too hard for me. And they say, but why not? And you just keep saying, because I can't. They can't give you a reason why you can.
Right. Right.
And so that was hard. It took a long time for my family to understand. And ultimately, I think what changed things a little bit from my perspective is that I eventually said, I get that you don't understand this. I spent a long time trying to explain. And then ultimately I said, I get that you don't understand this. And I actually get that you think that this is a bad decision for me, that you think I'm isolating myself, that you think I'm hurting myself. But I need you to trust me, and I need you to trust that I know what's best for me, and I cannot do this. And that's okay if you don't understand, but if you love me, I need you to support me. And I think that shifted because people were trying to understand and they couldn't. Because of that, they just kept thinking I was wrong.
Right.
And when I said, like, you're off the hook, you don't need to understand. You just need to believe me when I tell you I can't do it, and you need to back off. And that's a hard thing to do.
Especially with family. Oh my
It's
God.
with family and with best friends, and depending on people's cultural backgrounds, there are different levels of pressure. You know, I come from a family that has dinners once a week together. When I stopped coming, I was getting calls from my parents, my siblings, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins. Like everybody was like, oh my God, what's happening? And the thing that people didn't understand was that me not coming was me taking care of myself. Like it was better for my mental health. They saw that as being that, oh, Dara's not okay. And I realized that they just weren't going to understand that.
During those times, let's say, you know, your family is having dinner, you know, they're at their get together. I would imagine I would feel just like in a pit of despair and guilt, an absolute puddle on the floor. And like, I could imagine myself, my head spinning, like, oh my God, what did I do? Did I make a right choice? Am I going to regret this? Like, when you're not there, I guess, what do you do with yourself, for lack of a better way to put it?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to share that I have out of control FOMO. So
Me too. I'm a puddle on the floor.
You're talking to a person who I would rather go to a party I don't want to go to
Yeah. Do not forward
than miss a party if I know people are there, right? So like FOMO is alive and well in me. So I certainly take that question to heart. I think the thing that is important to remember is that there is nothing that you can do in this process. There's no tip or trick or strategy that is going to make this not painful. This is painful. That is something that I think sometimes the way people think about it, they're like, oh, if I go to that and if it's hard, or if I do this and if it's painful. There's no if. This is hard and painful. There is no escaping that. So going to a family dinner, going to a baby shower, there's no way that can't be painful. And staying home and missing an event that you otherwise would go to, missing an event with all the people that you love, missing a celebration, celebrating your sister, your cousin, your best friend since you were 5 years old. That is unbelievably painful. The way to think about this is really like a harm reduction strategy, which is going to be more painful. It's not about avoiding pain. You can't. There's no way to avoid the pain here. The issue is what's worth the pain, what's not worth the pain, and what is more or less painful. And I think you sort of intimated this, have a plan. My partner and I decided we love camping, and where the Jewish holidays fall, it is actually a beautiful time of year to go camping. So that's what we did. We went camping in September instead of going to our Rosh Hashanah dinners. Was that painful and sad? Yes. Did we cry on our camping trip? Yes. Did we miss our family and think like what they were doing and what, like all, yes. And was it 1,000 times better? Absolutely. Absolutely. And so thinking about, you know, if I think that attending this event, my pain is going to be at an 8, 9, 10, and not going, my pain is going to be at a 7, that's a win. That's the idea. And I would say one more thing, which is that if there's an event that you decide that you do want to go to, that the pain of attending it is worth it to you because of your relationship or because of the event, right? I had a patient tell me that it was her grandfather's 100th birthday. And I was like, yeah, like if you love your grandfather and it's his 100th birthday, like that's not the same thing as your sister's 35th birthday, right? Like, yeah, you know, you probably do need to go to that, but you don't need to go to the whole thing. You could leave early, you could show up late. And the other thing is have a plan around these events, right? So if you know that you're going to an event and it's going to be painful, what are you doing after the event? Can you plan on your own or with your support person to go for a walk? Can you pick a funny movie and a favorite food that you're going to eat? If it's going to be really bad, can you take the day off work the next day and get yourself a massage? Like have a bit of a plan so you don't have this painful event and then just come back home and be bereft, right? Have a self-care plan built around the thing that's going to hurt you.
Can we talk a little bit about guilt, or a lot about guilt? I love Mother's Day. I always did. And before I was trying to conceive, it was a big thing in my family, my grandmother, my aunts, my mom. I don't have sisters, but everybody else, cousins, we get together. And they would actually, year after year, they talked about their birth stories, either finding out they were pregnant or giving birth. I was 10, 11, and I heard the stories years after years. I actually think this is one of the reasons I ended up doing OB/GYN and fertility, because I grew up with this incredible joy of motherhood. I remember growing up being 12 or 14 and thinking one day I'll tell my story in these gatherings. And as I got into medicine and OB/GYN, the stories became even more real and more important because now I understood more than I did. So then the stories continue, and now I'm going through infertility, and it becomes even more painful because of this tradition of telling stories that I wasn't really part of. So for me, the fact that I loved the day and now I hated the day, made me feel really guilty. And then even after having my own children, my children are now 13 and 8. So it's been 13 years since I became a mother for the first time. And I still find Mother's Day so painful. Maybe because of what I do as a fertility specialist, knowing that it's so hard, but also because it's still raw. Like, I mean, you could probably tell I have a bit of tears in my eyes now for those who are not watching the video. But even though I have my children and my family is complete and I get to share the stories and I get to have the Mother Day that I envision, and my mom is alive, and I know that one day when she's not alive, that Mother Day is going to be really, really painful because I'm very close to her. But just like you're saying, April comes and late April comes and the beginning of May comes. I still feel that sense of guilt for not being present in the years past. That sense of guilt for knowing there are many people who are experiencing what I experienced, years ago, and I can't help them. That sense of guilt for knowing that in the years to come, when my mom is not alive, I'm going to really regret not having been present when I could. So can we talk about guilt? And I mean, that's just the guilt I feel, but I'm sure there's a lot of people who might experience something like, I have parents, or I have a family, so many people love me, and here I am miserable because I can't be a mom, or here I am, I'm not able to be happy for my friend that's having a baby shower because I can't have my own. What kind of a person is that? I know I hear that a lot. So can we talk a bit about those mixed emotions of I'm happy, but the guilt of not being happy enough the way that you're supposed to be?
Absolutely. I first just want to say that I had a visceral reaction to you sharing that tradition that you have in your family because, first of all, on its own, it's so beautiful. The idea of all these generations of women coming together and talking about something that is a fundamental part of being human and of being a woman, and how that shifts when you're going through infertility. And I think about my own experience, which ultimately was with surrogacy. And it makes me think about I would have been doubly left out of that experience because not only did I have all that infertility, but even when I was successful, I don't have a personal birth story. That makes me feel very emotional for you. And I feel like that is a really great example of this push and pull that all of us feel when we experience infertility and when we work in this field and we live in the sorrow of our patients, of our clients. I think it's important for people to remember that there are no bad emotions, right? As you said, people feel like I'm a terrible person. My best friend, sister, whatever is pregnant. I'm not happy for her. I'm missing out on these things. I'm a burden. I'm all these things. And the truth is that our feelings are our feelings. They just are. And I know that's easy for me to say, but not being able to be happy for somebody you love is not the same thing as wishing harm, right? I remember when I was going through this and people would not understand that. And they would say to me, but it's not like there's a limited number of babies. So-and-so who gets pregnant, it's not that that means that you're not going to. Like, there's not a limited number of babies that come into the world. Her pregnancy has nothing to do with you. And that's actually not true because every single person around you that gets pregnant is one less person that understands your experience. When you're trying to conceive, chances are your friends are too. And if you have a group of women or you come from a family with lots of cousins or whatever it is, if the people around you are all pregnant, getting pregnant, having children, and you end up being the only one who's not, then that means you have not only less people that understand you, but you have less events that you can go to. Because if you get a group of 5 or 6 women who are pregnant and have young children, of course they're talking about that. It's the biggest, hardest, most exciting, wonderful, frazzling thing that's happened to them. So it actually does take something away from you. And that's not anybody's fault. It's just the truth when people start walking on different paths. And so having a reaction to that, not being able to find in yourself happiness and joy for somebody that you love, whose big thing in their life is actively causing you pain, that doesn't make you a bad person. That makes you a human person. And so I think in terms of that guilt, being able to remind yourself of where it's coming from. I also have a little strategy that I can share. You had mentioned the idea earlier of, okay, some concrete things, like what can we actually do? So this strategy I find actually quite powerful. And it's one that for people listening, you may have to employ time and time and time again, millions of times. It's not like you do it once and it's going to stick. But let's say you have somebody in your life that you really, really love. And you imagine that before they were born, you were standing in front of an endless row of baskets. And in each basket were things that people get to have in their life. So one basket was full of health, good health or bad health. Another one, good jobs, bad jobs, safe city, bad city, loving, supportive, wonderful partner or terrible partner. You get the idea, right? Each basket was full of all these things. And one basket was kids or no kids. And you were in charge, actually. And you could walk down that row and you had a big basket of your own and you were reaching into each basket and you were filling up the basket. And at the end, the basket that you filled was actually going to be determining the life that your friend, sister, cousin, loved one had. Would you pick that they get kids or not? And when I ask this question to people, every single person I ask says, yes, of course. Of course, that's what they want. Of course I do. When you think about it that way, it allows yourself to say, instead of, why do they get what they want and I don't get what I want? It allows you to say, they get what I want for them. It reminds you that actually at a fundamental level, you want this for them. You want them to have a healthy pregnancy. You want them to have children. You do not want them to suffer. You do not want them to have miscarriages. You're just in pain. And when we're in pain, our emotions are raw.
That's a really incredible strategy. And really, you can use it for so many emotions. Dr. Garcia was talking about guilt, but there's not just guilt. There's the sadness, the anger, resentment, and that can really apply to any of those emotions, the whole gamut, truly.
Yeah. I mean, the truth is people often say, it's not fair. And then that always feels complicated because I think of that as it's such a human thing to feel. And it comes from such a childish kind of immature, right? Like it's not fair. It's not fair. And I think all of us have that in us. And the truth is that nothing in life is fair. And sometimes we are fortunate enough to be on the good side of the not fair. And so we don't think about it that way, right? Like I live in Toronto. It's a pretty safe city. That's not fair. Millions of people around the world live in cities that are really unsafe. I don't deserve to live here. I'm just lucky, right? Except for my infertility and a few other kind of minor health things. I'm actually a pretty healthy person. That's not fair. I was born with lungs that work pretty well. I was born with legs and arms that move. My digestive system, I have celiac, so not 100%, but it's pretty good. My heart works great. I have all of these systems in my body that work really well. And that's completely unfair. I don't do anything to make that happen for myself. Even if I eat well and exercise, lots of people eat well and exercise and have diabetes or have heart conditions, or right? Like I'm just lucky. But it's not fair that I'm lucky. I just am in those ways. And simultaneously with my reproductive health, I was not lucky. I was born with a reproductive system that was a disaster. I don't deserve it, but I wouldn't have deserved a reproductive system that worked well either. So I think sometimes being able to balance that and just recognize that none of this stuff is fair and it's okay to be angry about it. It's okay. It's not helpful to stay in that anger. But having those feelings of anger, of jealousness, of bitterness, of grief, those are just human emotions that are coming out because this is a really profound experience. Which also brings me back actually to something I wanted to say about Dr. Garcia, something you said before about, even though you have your children, it's amazing to you and surprising to you that there's still pain at Mother's Day. The truth is that having children doesn't cure infertility, right? Having children solves not having children. It's as simple as that. So I could have 100 kids. That's not going to change the fact that I'm infertile and needed to do IVF and surrogacy. When fertility treatment works, when people naturally conceive, or when people do donation, surrogacy, adoption, all of these things, they do not solve infertility and they do not solve the trauma of infertility. They solve not having a child. And so that pain and that trauma, it's still part of who we are and part of our job as we move forward in life is figuring out what to do with that. Just like we have to figure out what to do with all the other losses and pains and sorrows that we get hit with throughout our lives. And that's why it's still complicated for you, because you know how lucky you are. You know how many people aren't lucky. You feel the pain of yourself sitting at the table, being left out of those conversations. All of that is still part of your bones, right? That's still there.
That is very true. I get that on an intellectual level, but I still feel knocked out of balance when I feel the pain of infertility so strongly in my bones. I'm like, it's 13 years, you know, like since I became a mom, and it can really take the wind out of my lungs sometimes. I'm not saying I live with it every single day. It is different. Like back then, I do live with it every single day. Now it's less to some degree, but every once in a while, something would happen and it literally takes the wind out of my lungs, and it surprises me because I don't expect it. I think I should be over it by now.
Yeah. There's a great analogy. It's a golf ball analogy. So people often talk about grief in a mistaken way. People often talk about grief as something you get over or something you get through. And we have expressions like, oh, time heals all wounds. And that's completely not true. The golf ball analogy is, imagine the pain, the big pain that you have when you're in the middle of infertility, when you've had a miscarriage, when somebody you love has died. If that pain is a golf ball, that golf ball is sitting on a shot glass. The pain is so huge that the ball can't even fit in the shot glass. It takes up all of the space. With time, that golf ball is sitting in a juice glass, and then it's sitting in a pint glass, and then it's sitting in a pitcher, and then it's sitting in a box, and then it's sitting in a corner of a house. The golf ball is the exact same size. The pain is the pain is the pain. Like nothing changes that, right? My dad died relatively young and quite suddenly, and it's been about 17 years now. The fact that he's dead is not better or easier, right? The fact that I will never be able to carry a baby to term, that is the greatest sorrow of my life. Like time doesn't make that better. So that golf ball, that pain, it stays literally the same size for your entire life. What's different is that you build up things around it so that in the time when you're experiencing it, all you see is the golf ball. It takes up all of the space. And then with time, it takes up less space, not because it's smaller, but because you build things around it. And then every once in a while you turn in a way, and then you're hit with it again, right? And so maybe that's Mother's Day. For my father, it's if I see something on a menu that I don't recognize. He always used to order things. If he didn't know what it was, he wouldn't ask what it was. He would just order it. So sometimes if I see something on a menu I've never heard of, I get like a deep ache for my dad. For my infertility, my kids are now 21 and 19, carried by surrogates. A number of years ago, I was somewhere and somebody I knew who had not really been interested in having children and then just kept having kids easily. I found out they were unintentionally and didn't know what they were doing and pregnant with their third. And I found out and I burst into tears immediately. And I was shocked that that was my reaction because I had my kids and my kids weren't even babies anymore. But that golf ball is there, right? I had wanted 4 kids and I certainly didn't want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and do 6 IVF cycles, right? That pain doesn't disappear. Those golf balls stay. And you know, if you think about how you were treated as a little kid, if you were bullied in school, if there was a job you desperately wanted, or a girlfriend or boyfriend that broke your heart, like those pains stay with us. We're full of these golf balls. And sometimes we don't notice them at all. And sometimes we do.
That is a very, very good analogy. Makes sense.
And it's applicable to so many things too.
Yeah, for anything, to any type of pain or trauma. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that for somebody who, let's say, that person, you found out that they were pregnant and you burst into tears, if there's somebody around you, they're going to be looking at you, probably thinking whoa, like what is this reaction happening? They might not understand. But I think that that analogy is such a great illustration. And I think that so many people will understand it because it's not just about infertility, right? It can, as you said, the grief of losing a parent, the traumas that we have as children and stuff. And I think that really makes it so profound and universal, really, right? And really applicable, which is incredible.
And it allows you, in terms of that guilt that you mentioned, to put that into perspective. The truth is that all of us as human beings are walking around filled with golf balls. Some of us have more than others, for sure. Every single person out there is not going to be able to show up for the people that they love as the best version of themselves all of the time. That's just true. The friend that you weren't able to be there for through her pregnancy, maybe at some point something is happening in her marriage or with one of her parents or with one of her kids, and she kind of drops off the face of the earth, right? Like she doesn't respond to your messages or calls, or she can't help you, she can't support you. Life is really, really hard. And none of us are able to be our best selves all of the time for all of the people in our lives or at our jobs. I hear that a lot too, where people feel really guilty because they're not doing a great job at their job. And all of us have things, right? There's no person out there who always shows up to their job and gives 100% every single day, all of the time. That's not humanly possible. Trying to work on self-compassion, giving yourself some grace, and recognizing that this is the season in your life where you are not your best for other people. It's true, right? You probably are letting down your best friend, your sister, maybe your mom. You're not showing up for people that you love in the way that you would have otherwise. You're not imagining that. That's a true thing. They're also not showing up for you in the way that you need. And there'll be other times in life where this happens in opposite ways. And that's okay because you're doing your best.
At the beginning of this great conversation, you talked about boundaries and this notion that you have to do things, but you don't really. But you also mentioned the story of, I think it was a patient you mentioned that it was her 100th birthday with the grandmother. So there are times where you just have to show up. I remember, again, when I was going through my journey, my best friend asked me to be the godmother to her child. And I look at the dates and I was like, I'm going to be having an embryo transfer and a pregnancy test like 3 days before this event. And I say yes, because, it's the baptism, and she books the date that works for her family. And it was an honor to do that. But I was really anticipating what I would like when I get this, probably at this point, it was maybe 5th or 6th negative test, and they showed for the baptism. And I ended up, but the test was positive. But by the time the baptism came, the beta had dropped. And I was like bleeding quite a bit when I was there and had to, do all the things while I was actively having a miscarriage at this baptism. And I don't remember what strategies I used, but all I remember is that after it was said and done, like if somebody had to ask me about my list of accomplishments, I could probably put this day very high up on the list, right up there with all the things that people think I should be writing as a list of accomplishments, because it was so hard, but I was so proud of myself when it was all said and done, of the way that I showed up, the way that I did it, and all the things. So sometimes you just have to show up for things. So can we talk about that? Can we talk about showing up when you're not wanting to, or you're not ready to, or you shouldn't, but you really have no choice?
Absolutely. I feel very proud of you too. That is absolutely something to feel really, that's incredible that you were able to do that. It's also true that if you had not been able to, I would have been just as proud of you. For me, what's important is that people are making intentional choices. And so for something like that, I think, and this is going to sound maybe really bad, but I think it's helpful for people to really think about the people in your life. Literally make a list of who are the people in your life. And then start to think about who in your life is worth paying. Like, really. And so we all have lots of people in our life that we care about. But if we really think about it, maybe some of those people, you like them, you enjoy having them in your life, they're a good friend or they're a nice relative, but the amount of pain it causes you to be with them or to go to that event is not in line with how you feel about them. As opposed to you think about somebody who is incredibly close to you, somebody who is honoring you with the role of being a godparent. And you think, actually, that person is worth my pain. That is worth it for me. So not, I'm going to go and it's not going to be painful. How can I make it not painful? No, you can't make it not painful. So saying, this is going to be really hard and I'm going to do it because this person is worth it to me. So you're making just that very intentional choice. It's a way of taking back control, where instead of waiting to see if something is going to hurt or waiting to think about how much it's going to hurt, you're able to say, this is actually going to be unbelievably painful. If you're in the midst of a miscarriage, it's going to be physically painful. It's going to be practically complicated. I'm bleeding. What's happening? And emotionally, it's going to be hard. And I know that. And I'm expecting it. And I'm accepting it because this is somebody that is worth it to me. And so I think being able to make those intentional choices allows you to realize, you know what, I'd be sad and sorry to lose that person as a friend. Like, I like them, but actually it's okay. I'll be okay if I'm not friends with them because I have to parcel out my energy in very, very careful ways. Right? We only have so much battery life in us. And so that day cost you a lot. And you want to make sure that that cost is worth it.
Very well said. I think I remember I was going through therapy at the time, and I had a whole therapy session exactly about this, about like this event that I needed to go and how I was going to do it. It was a very similar conversation that at the end I felt like she was worth it and I wanted to do that. And like you said, the pain of not going was going to be higher than the pain of going. And
yeah. And I think the trick is to be really intentional about that, because I think at the beginning of this, it feels like everybody's worth it. Of course, they're all worth it. They're all my friends. Of course, they're all worth it. They're all my family. They expect me to. I want to. The pressure from family. And sometimes it's hard to differentiate between I want to, I have to. Right? Mm-hmm. So to really separate that out, because even this woman's grandfather's 100th birthday, she actually didn't have to. Everybody would have been mad and horrified and angry and whatever, but she still didn't have to. In discussion, it turned out that she wanted to go more than she didn't want to go. Right? So really starting to untangle that idea of what you have to do, what you need to do, to understand, like, I want to do this more than I don't want to do it. Because this event with this person is worth it to me.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about something here, kind of change gears a little bit. Earlier on, you mentioned, your family was celebrating Rosh Hashanah and you went camping with your partner, and that, that was one way that you kind of were able to not be in the most painful situation, but still a painful situation. And, there's always going to be pain. One common theme that I hear a lot, and I'm sure Dr. Garcia hears a lot because we've talked about this before, is the way, let's say, a patient sees something versus their partner seeing something. Like, you might understand the pain, what you're going to feel, but sometimes partners don't. It's inherently, fertility, infertility is a very different experience for patient and for the partner. And, there are amazing, wonderful, fabulous partners out there, but the experience is different. And sometimes I hear patients tell me, the partner just doesn't quite get it. How do you talk to your partner? How do you get them to start to get it, I guess? Or how do you get them to help you navigate these events, these tricky events? There's potentially partner's family, your family, and all of that.
It's a great question. And I'm smiling because one of the strong memories I have from my own infertility was the time that my partner said that they didn't want to attend something because they found it too hard and too sad. I'm laughing because I was so happy. I was like, join me in my darkness.
Misery loves company. They do say
misery loves company, right? And until then, they had actually been, I was quite lucky. They were very supportive in the sense of like not pressuring me to go to things I didn't want to go to, but they didn't really understand. Like other people's pregnancy announcements didn't cause them pain. They were okay to go into things. So they didn't understand, although they were supportive of me. But I do remember that day where they were just like overcome and they were like, I get it. I can't. And they started crying. And I was like, I was so happy. So terrible, but I was just like, yes, I'm not alone.
No. I don't think it's terrible. Like, honestly, I think that's extremely valid. And I can totally imagine that. I can totally get it because, oftentimes, again, not always, but, there's the person going through the fertility, the infertility, the person experiencing the miscarriage, the injections, the egg retrievals, feeling like a bloated cow, like, all of these things. And then there's this other person who's often just like, living life.
Absolutely. So,
doing their thing.
Absolutely. So I'd say a couple of things. And I think for context, what I'm talking about are people who have supportive partners. There are people out there who don't have supportive partners, and there are people out there who don't have partners. And that's a whole other kettle of fish for sure. But for people who the issue is that they have a generally speaking supportive partner who just isn't getting it. And the truth is that's not just gendered, because there is something about being the treatment person, being the actual patient undergoing things that is, the experience is so embodied that nobody else could possibly understand it. And so part of that could be trying to actually help them understand it. One of the things I find is that women in particular don't share things that would be helpful for a partner to know. And they don't share things because they don't want to trouble them, because they don't want to bother them, because they don't think they'll get it, because they're used to it, right? Like I think even totally like an analogy when the Me Too thing came out and people started talking about it, and I have a pretty progressive partner, and they were completely astonished to realize that every single woman I know has been sexually harassed. And if you think of sexual assault as being somebody grabbing your breasts or your buttock without you wanting them to, every single woman I know has been sexually assaulted. And that stuff started at about age 10 or 11 for most of the women I know. Like, he could not believe that. And I had never told them those things because every time somebody made a cat call or a rude comment or rubbed up against me, I didn't come home and tell them, right? And with fertility, it's the same thing. If you're going for psychomonitoring all the time, unless that is existentially traumatic for you, unless you have a physical condition or you've been sexually assaulted and that is absolutely traumatic for you, most of us don't like it. It's uncomfortable. It's awful a little bit. It can be humiliating. It can hurt a bit, but like, it's also fine, right? It's more sort of death by 1,000 paper cuts. Getting your blood drawn is fine. A transvaginal ultrasound is fine. So you're not coming home every day and talking about, actually, it is kind of awful. Oftentimes people are like, no, it's fine. You can sleep. There's no point in both of us waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's fine. I can do it alone. You sleep. I'll just go and I'll do it, right? I'm giving myself my shots. I know how to do it. There's no reason for you to get up off the couch and also do it. Oftentimes we're letting them off the hook because we know that we can do it. We feel like it's our job and our responsibility to do it. From a clinic perspective, clinics often emphasize that. There are clinics out there that even when patients ask, they won't send emails to the partner. They only think of the patient as being the person who's undergoing the treatment, even if the partner is the one providing sperm. So he's obviously a patient too. But clinics often, that's the default, right? It just goes to the person undergoing treatment. That's where the phone calls go. That's where the emails go. Typically, it's not required that partners attend appointments. So then it's sort of like, well, there's no point in both of us taking off work. So I think one thing I would say is for people to stop doing that. Like most of them, I mean, to be gendered here, most of the men that I speak to want to do more. They just don't know what to do. And so I think being able to find ways for them to be part of this, not because you can't do it on your own, but because they're there and they want to. And the other thing I would say too is that while there is something uniquely terrible about being the body under treatment, and any of us who've been through treatment know that, there is something uniquely devastating about watching somebody that you love suffer and not being able to do anything. Right. So for a lot of these people, like they they would love to do half the ultrasounds or they would love to take those injections. And so I think also being able to have not just compassion for yourself, but imagine what it would be like to have somebody that you love going through something so hard for you. So you can also have a baby.
Right.
And you can't do anything practical like that to make it easier for them. So I think it's a combination of stop trying to do everything on your own. Like tell them, have them come to things, right? Like if you have to miss work, maybe they can miss work too sometimes. If you have to wake up, they can wake up too sometimes, right? Like having them do those things and also explaining some things that often people don't, right? So in the 2-week wait, I speak to women who almost dehydrate themselves because they're so afraid to go to the bathroom and see menstrual blood. So they want to avoid peeing. So they're trying not to drink so that they go to the bathroom less. And then every time they go to the bathroom, they have like a mini panic attack as they're pulling down their pants and looking at their underwear and wiping. Almost none of them have ever shared that with a partner. And it's such a visceral thing that if you can share that with a partner and help them understand, like, think about how many times a day you pee. Imagine having a panic attack every time you peed. That's why when you get home at the end of the day, you're feeling okay and I'm a mess. Because that's what happened to me 10 times today. Even though if you ask me what happened, like nothing happened today. We got no new news. There was no change. But that was part of my day every couple of hours when I peed. So I think there's those experiences that we're not sharing with our partners because we don't think to share it with them because it's just part of our life doing this.
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent point. And I think, I think many patients are guilty of that for sure in terms of not sharing things. Because, for instance, like dehydrating yourself to not pee, I can imagine that there may almost be a little bit of shame or guilt with sharing that because you're kind of giving voice to something that when you say it out loud, I'm sure many people's brains are processing as kind of irrational because like not drinking is not going to change the fact of whether you have the miscarriage or not at the end of the day. And I think everybody understands that. But the giving voice to it and talking about it, even if it sounds scary, even if it makes you sound like a quote unquote crazy person, which is another big fear that women truly have, that they fear sounding quote unquote crazy, especially to their partner, and quote unquote emotional, because those have their own negative connotations, let's say, in society with women.
Yep.
But you're right. This is your partner. This is the person that you're doing this thing with. This is the person that you're wanting to raise children with. You're better off letting them in sooner rather than later and letting them into all the crazy, the quote unquote crazy.
Absolutely. A strategy that a lot of the people that I work with employ, it's a really lovely one, is there's no doubt that the treatment partner is thinking about this more, right? Like in that 2-week wait, every twinge, is it implantation? Is it a fart? Is it a period cramp? Like what is happening with your body? And the non-treatment partner has the luxury of not thinking about that. But that doesn't mean that that person is not thinking about it at all. It's always a balance when I'm speaking with couples, when I'm speaking with individuals about their relationships between how do we share what's happening with each other, but how do we not be talking about it all of the time in ways that stop feeling helpful to us? Because if this is ongoing for you, it's not like the conversation you had Wednesday is different than the conversation you had Thursday, right? Well, like I could have talked about this for hours and hours and hours and hours. My partner didn't have the same capacity to talk about the same thing for hours and hours. And so one strategy, it's really simple, is pick an icon. It could be a little heart, anything that has a bit of meaning for the two of you. And during the day, when something happens, when you start to think about things, just send your partner that heart emoji. And what ends up happening then is it's sort of evident to the other person how much you're thinking about it in a particular day. For the non-treatment partner, it's an opportunity to show the treatment partner that, in fact, they are thinking about it. Maybe not as much. And maybe at the end of the day, the non-treatment partner only sends 2 hearts. But that's 2 more times than the partner actually thought they were thinking about it. And if I'm on the receiving end of that and I get 15 of those heart emojis during the day from my partner, then I know that maybe we're ordering in some dinner and cuddling on the couch tonight, right? Like I know that they've had a rough day. It can help because sometimes you don't necessarily want to spend your whole night talking about it. That feels overwhelming and it takes up everything. And so it's a really straightforward way to say, I'm thinking of you, I'm thinking of us, I'm thinking of this. And especially for the non-treatment partner, it can be a really powerful way of showing the person who's undergoing treatment, you're not alone in this. Like, I'm thinking about this too.
Yeah, and that can apply outside of fertility. I have a wonderful, loving partner, supportive partner, but it can't read minds.
What?
I know we should, right?
No. Oh my God. Thank God my partner can't read my mind.
So infertility and then having little kids, it's just the same thing. You just get up and you do the thing, and then you end up being really angry that they weren't helping or that you're doing all those things. It's like Marta said, you have to let them in on the crazy. You have to let them in on the thought process. And the example of the bathroom and the pee, no, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you're right. It's like at the end of the day, you went to the bathroom and pee like it was no big deal. You probably had your phone with you. Meanwhile, I did that and I had my phone with me just so I could breathe through it.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This has been really helpful. It's been a therapy session for me in a way, having you on the podcast. So thank you so much. I know that it's going to help so many people, even for people who don't necessarily celebrate Mother's Day in their families. It is such a big day in society. And like you're saying, it's everywhere with the emails and all the things on the TV and the expectations. I can imagine, even if you're don't necessarily come from a family that recognizes that, I can't imagine going through infertility and passing this day and not being somehow affected by it. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing so many wonderful insights. I'm thinking, our producer has to get little clicks. I'm like, I don't know where she's going to shoot. I love the go ball analogy. And I love, when we talked about guilt and it's really, it has been wonderful having you. And I did shed a few tears because this is still, like you're saying, having children doesn't cure infertility. That was probably one of the most powerful things that I've gotten from this. And like I said, I know it on an intellectual level, but sometimes it still surprises me on an emotional level. I remember when I had children, I was already a fertility specialist, and I would go through this journey with patients, and then they would get pregnant, and I would be so happy for them. And at this point, I was doing OB care, so I would follow them through the whole pregnancy, and then I would see them from postpartum. And I would walk into this room, finally, my patient of 2 years of her baby through IVF, and she's now in the room with her baby, waiting for me to see them. And I walk into the room being like, it's going to be a party. And I didn't know. Because I hadn't had that experience. In my mind, it's like, you want a baby, you have a baby, now you're happy. That's what's supposed to happen, right? So I walk into this room expecting like rainbows and sunshine and unicorns. And of course, they were grateful. There's no question. But I sometimes felt that their insecurity or the grief is still there. And it will leave me confused because I would be like, I don't understand. There's a thing they want and they have it. And then, of course, I went through it personally, right? And I'm like, oh, light bulb. I totally get it now that, taking a baby home, first of all, that's its own challenge. But, that's not what we're going to talk about today. But regardless, it doesn't magically take the pain of having been through fertility or miscarriages away. And I think a lot of people expect that it does. And they think that something is wrong with them when it doesn't, or that they're not grateful enough, or that they're not happy enough, or that they should just get over it by now, just like I did. Out of the many takeaways, this is one of the best takeaways from this episode. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. I mean, the truth is that people who go through infertility have higher rates of perinatal mood and anxiety disorder.
Yes.
And I think you must see that in your practice.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
For me, when there's a pregnancy, people's anxiety spikes.
Yes.
And a good way of thinking about it is that for people who've gone through many years of infertility, it took them a long time to get to be that sad and that scared. That doesn't disappear in a snap because you see a heartbeat on an ultrasound. You have to work really, really hard to rewire your brain into believing that something good could happen. You have to accept the fact that just because you went through infertility, that doesn't mean you have to love being pregnant. It doesn't mean you have to love being a mom. Like, being a new mom is hard. You don't have to love every minute of it just because you went through infertility, right? And so it can feel, as you said, very, very confusing to have spent so long wanting and working towards something and then to not feel just perfect about it. And so that's an important thing for people to know. Absolutely. and that there is goodness on the other side. I do want to say that not only if you have children, even if you don't, that there is a fear that all of this sadness and grief, these golf balls, that not only will they stay part of you, but that they have become all of you.
Right.
And I do want to make sure that people know that that is not true, that while you cried today and while I cried at that pregnancy announcement, and I do have moments of sharpness for sure when I think about my infertility, that we move through things and we grow from things. And there's an entire area of study now called post-traumatic growth about how we grow from the hard things that we have been through. And so I do want to make sure that as we wrap up, that I am making sure people know that even if you feel like you are a shell of yourself now, and even if you've lost track of who you used to be and those qualities of yourself that you really love that you're not seeing in the mirror anymore, I actually promise you that on the other side of this, whatever the other side looks like, that there will be beautiful parts of you that have come from this experience, old parts of yourself that you will find, and new parts that will grow.
I take it back. That's the best takeaway.
That's such a beautiful picture. I have this beautiful mental image of that in my mind. And I think this episode, we want to talk about Mother's Day, and we know that Mother's Day is a very big trigger for many of our patients. There's so much that we covered in this episode that's so universal to the infertility experience of going through treatment, to the experience of pregnancy, to the experience even of a little bit of early motherhood we talked about, but even just like life in general. We have touched on absolutely everything. I feel like I want everybody to listen to this episode, fertility patient or not, because there's so many universal truths. If people can start to see the universality of the experience, the feelings of guilt, resentment, anger, sadness, how they can be seen in so many other facets of life, when you can sort of relate to people on those levels, even if you haven't had the exact experience, then I think that everybody can move forward from that. So I want everybody to listen to this episode, fertility patient or not, and especially partners.
I have a quote that I printed out in case there was a good place to put it because it's so powerful and it speaks to exactly what you just said. It's from a book I read, and the quote is, "He said gently and calm, every human grief you will ever experience has been experienced by humans living and humans yet to come. There is no readiness for it, nor no easing of the pain. But for what it's worth, I think you should know that all of humanity that was, is, and will be is with you now by your side."
Which book is that? Which book?
It's called The Sudden Appearance of Hope by Claire North.
Oh.
It's a novel, but that quote, yes, like every single thing, every single fertility patient is feeling, every single human being has felt before and will feel in the future.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's it. That's the end of the episode. Like there's nowhere to go from there. That's perfect. Mind blown.
It's a pretty powerful quote.
And that's a wrap for today, Superhumans.
If you're looking to connect, get social with us. Follow us on YouTube and Instagram at My Fertility Podcast or visit us online at myconfertility.com. And don't forget, follow, subscribe, and share your favorite episode.
Thanks for listening to My Fertility Podcast and for being a vital part of our community. We know you've got this.
We're signing off until next Tuesday.
If you found this episode of My Fertility Podcast helpful, please take a moment to head over to the review section and leave us your thoughts. Your reviews and comments are incredibly valuable to us and help guide future episodes. We also welcome you to direct your questions to info@myfertilitypodcast.com.
My Fertility Podcast is produced by Rabbit Media Inc. in conjunction with Dr. Garcia and Dr. Weiss.
Music by Mixkit. Life is a Dream by Michael Ramirez C.
My Fertility Podcast is not intended to replace any type or variation thereof professional medical, health, or legal advice, nor should the content be taken as medical advice. Please contact your primary healthcare professional regarding any medical questions you may have. The information presented in this podcast is based on the knowledge and understanding of the host at the time of recording. Medical knowledge is constantly evolving, and new research may change the understanding of health-related topics. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, we do not guarantee the completeness, accuracy, or timeliness of the content. The views expressed in this podcast by guests are not those of the host or the management. This podcast is not intended to impose any type of discrimination discrimination. My Fertility Podcast and its management are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast.